Hello, my name is Justin Stamford and I am the HLTA in the Deaf Hub based at St John Fisher Catholic High School in Peterborough. I have created this PowerPoint to give a little insight into how we support our deafblind learners in school. I have attached a feedback form with this PowerPoint. Please can you take 5 minutes at the end to complete this form online. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me on justin.stamford@stjohnfisherschool.org.uk. Thank you. Before we begin, I would just like to tell you a little bit about St John Fisher Catholic High School. We are a mainstream secondary school with around about 830 students, 55 teachers and roughly 14 teaching assistants. In Peterborough, some schools have a specialism within an area of SEM and they call them hubs. We specialise in supporting deaf students, so therefore we have the Deaf Hub. But we do have some students with vision impairments also, and also some students who are both deaf and vision impaired. Because we are the Deaf Hub in Peterborough, we make sure our school, as a whole school, is deaf friendly. Our classrooms have sound fields and clever touches. All of our staff are trained on deaf awareness, and we also have a large number of staff that are trained in British Sign Language. Our hub students get a mainstream education with a tailored package of interventions from within the hub and weekly visits from the teachers of the deaf from the Sensory Support Service. We also have a wide range of resources in school to help support mainstream lessons for our deaf students. If anyone would like to use our resources, then please contact the hub and we can help support. A good transition into secondary school is vital to make sure that the student has the best possible start to school life. A good start can make a massive difference to their education. In the past, we have visited certain students in their primary school setting. First of all, we'll do this on one occasion, maybe for an hour, just to introduce ourselves, maybe play some games, get to know the student, let them get to know you, and then invite the student into your school. So the student can come into your school maybe 2 weeks later, and then you can give them a very small introduction into the school, maybe into the hub if you have a hub, or maybe into some of their key classrooms, maybe 1 or 2 classrooms, to meet maybe a handful of staff at most on the first occasion. Then what you can do is you can go and visit them again in their setting, take with you some photographs of some of their key members of staff, so maybe their English teacher, the maths teacher, maybe the student support officer, the form tutor, and maybe a couple of teaching assistants. And then again invite the student back into school. This time you can go on a further tour, maybe going over where you went before, but then adding a bit more to it, and maybe meeting some more staff, just so they can familiarise themselves with the school. Another good thing, what we've done in the past, is give them an iPad, and they can, as they're going around the school, they can take photographs of the classes, the halls, the people, and then they can print those photographs and take them back with them, and they can show their parents, their friends, the teachers, and they can just literally, it would just help them to be less anxious and less worried about what's going to happen when they move into secondary school. What you do need to be wary of is the student will be coming from a primary school with 1 teacher and 1 teaching assistant, and they'll be having multiple teachers, multiple teaching assistants, student support officers. Now for a deaf or vision impaired student, this can be very daunting, and it needs to be considered and managed very carefully. This year we hosted a summer school for 2 weeks, and we had about 20 students, 20 Year 7 students attend. When I say Year 7, they would have been Year 6 going into Year 7. This was very successful, to be honest, and it gave us, staff, and the students the head start that we needed for the academic year. And it's something that we'll definitely be doing again. I just want to give you a quick overview of the tech that we use to support our deaf students. Now, I have done another PowerPoint which goes into much more detail about the technology that we use for our deaf students. If you'd like to see that, or if you want any more information, then you can find that on our website. Okay, most deaf students will have hearing aids in one or both of their ears. The student will know how to use these, but sometimes the battery may run out during your lesson. If this happens in our school, the student will come up to the hub and replace the battery themselves. So it may be useful, if you do have any students with hearing aids, to have an area where they can store spare batteries, because there are only small, very small watch batteries, and they don't last very long, sometimes 24 hours. So yeah, they can go, so be aware of that. The other thing we have here is radio aids. You may come across them from time to time, you may not, but these are great little devices that are worn around your neck, and they transmit your voice directly into the student's hearing aid. These are especially useful if you're not close to the student, or if you have a mask on, for example, and they're not able to lip read. A radio aid would really help in that situation. The other thing I want to mention there are sound fields. These are very large speakers that sit on the wall, and they amplify your voice. They work for the whole class as well, so it's not just for deaf students. They actually help to raise your voice and raise the attention of your students in your class to your voice. The other great thing about sound fields is they can be run with a radio aid as well, so the radio aid can be connected to the sound field, so that all your students in the class get the sound field, but also your deaf learner will also be able to have the radio aid set to his hearing aid, his or her hearing aid. Again, if you need to know how to do that, that's in my last video. There are also a number of apps that you can download onto iPads. A good example would be the Google Live Transcribe, which is a free speech to text application. So basically, as you're speaking, the text goes onto the device in real time. So what you're saying is translated into words, into text, and then it's put onto the device, and that's actually done in real time. And these are getting better and better all the time. There are many recommendations in the classroom that we have for our deaf students. I have a whole A4 page which I give to new staff when they start in our school. If you would like a copy of this, then please email me. Today I would just like to highlight what I feel are the most important actions to consider. Please make sure you seat your deaf student at the front of the class. Ensure that there is no background noise from an open door or an open window, or even an overhead projector. The humming of the fans can be a distraction, so please be aware of any background noise. A good point to make about radio aids is don't have anything that can touch the radio aid. For example, lanyards need to be removed, as they tend to touch the radio aid and create a loud tapping noise into the student's hearing aid. Also, jewellery like bracelets and bangles that move around and make a noise, they will get picked up on the radio aid. One last thing about radio aids: remember to mute the radio aid when you're not speaking to the learner. the first thing is it's very distracting for the learner if he's trying to concentrate and you're talking to another student. It's going straight into his hearing aid. Also, sometimes you may be speaking to another staff member and you may have confidential information that you don't want that learner to hear. So please remember to mute the radio aid when you need to. When talking to a deaf learner, please make sure you stand still and show your face when speaking. Deaf students lip read, and if they cannot see your lips, then they're going to struggle to understand what you're trying to say to them. Which brings me on to my next point about face masks. Due to the current situation with the COVID pandemic and everything else, we're having to wear masks now again in school. If you have a deaf learner and you're wearing a mask, if you could, please try and get the masks that show your lips. It's like a sort of see-through or transparent plastic on the mask where the deaf learner can actually see your lips moving. Keep your instructions as simple as possible. Don't add unnecessary words and use as many pictures as you can to help the students' understanding. Try where possible to keep noise levels in the classroom to a minimum. If you're worried about background noise, then you can get a decibel meter in your classroom which flashes red when the noise gets too loud. Or a cheaper example would be the website called Bouncy Balls. This works by using your computer's microphone and detecting the noise of the classroom, and if you can set the sensitivity levels on it, but if it gets too loud, the balls on the screen start to bounce around all over the place, and if it gets even louder, and it actually then comes up and says shh. It's quite a good program. Last point I'd like to make is always remember to repeat any useful contributions from other students. The deaf learner may be able to hear you because of the radio aid. They may be looking at your lips, but if another student contributes to the lesson and it's a very good contribution, the deaf learner is not going to be able to hear that unless you repeat that contribution. So just please remember to repeat any useful contributions. Now I would like to talk to you a little bit about the tech that we use in school for our VI students. I'll start with iPads, as these are a very useful tool for students with vision impairment. With an iPad, students can access the lesson PowerPoint, providing you email it to them. From there, they can then zoom in to the PowerPoint. They can also use the iPad to take pictures of the whiteboard and zoom in, and they can also use it to take pictures of books or paper and again zoom in. Please remember to remind your students to get those iPads charged, because if they're using it every day, they're going to lose charge, and the last thing you want is to get to lesson and there be no charge in the iPad. Next, we can move on to laptops. These are useful, but they're not quite as good as the iPad. They're not as versatile, but the great thing about a laptop is the fact that the PowerPoint can still be emailed to it, but they have a keyboard, a full-size keyboard, which is really good for getting the students used to typing. And if they need to use a laptop in their exam, in their GCSE exams, they're going to need to start using those laptops as their normal way of working in lessons. So it's good practice to get the students to use the laptops in lessons, and then when it comes to their GCSE exams, they're ready to go, and you've got evidence to prove that that's their normal way of working. Now here at St John Fisher, in every one of our classrooms, we now have the Clever Touch, which has replaced the interactive whiteboards. These are so much clearer, they have a much better resolution, much more colour depth, and they can just be seen so much easier. The best part about them though is that they can interact with the iPads. You can display from the Clever Touch directly to the iPad in real time. Also, you can display from the iPad back to the Clever Touch in real time. So if a student's working or did something on the iPad and would like to show the class, it can be transmitted straight away to the Clever Touch. The last one on my list there, the RNIB Bookshare. This is an application or program that can be installed on computers or iPads or phones, and It has nearly 1 million books, something like 800,000, I think, book titles on its library. And these book titles, they could be text, educational textbooks, fiction books, whatever. They can be zoomed in or shown in a larger font, and also they can be transferred from text to speech, so they can actually read it to you, which is awesome, to be honest. The last thing I've got there on my list is AMVC, so Arthur Mellows Village College. They are the hub in Peterborough for VI students. So I quite often, if I need to find some information, if I can't find it out, I quite often can find it on their website. So if you get a bit of time or you need some help with some VI, if we can't supply that to you, then you can contact AMVC or have a look on their website. Here are some of the good practices that we use in school to support our vision impaired learners. I think the first one, or the most important one there, is to always seat the student as close to the board as possible. Their vision may be good enough to see something, and the closer they are to the board, the better. Always email any PowerPoint, PDF, or anything really, directly to the student so they can access this on their laptop or their iPad. From there, they will then be able to zoom in further. Remember to keep PowerPoints as simple as possible. What I mean by this is to try and keep colour to a minimum and visual noise to a minimum. Try and use white backgrounds, keep font sizes as big as possible, and keep colour of the font to black. Obviously use pictures to support your text, but keep them nice and clear. Font sizes on paperwork may need to be changed. Please remember not to enlarge your paperwork to A3, as this is not the right practice. A3 paper is too big. Instead, modify your documents and enlarge the font for their vision. In school, for our vision impaired learners, we use font size 36. This may be different for any students that you have. If you have to use the whiteboard, then please remember to use a thick black pen and enlarge your writing as big as possible. Allow your vision impaired students to use their iPad to take any photographs of the board or textbooks or paper documents. They will then be able to use these photographs and zoom in to access the content. If you can, remember to use RNI Bookshare. They have many books on their library, and please remember they're always adding new books, so keep checking. If you're doing a practical lesson, it may benefit the student to video the practical lesson, so that then later on during the lesson they can refer back to it and then maybe zoom in. Like us here at St John Fisher, you may also have some students that are vision impaired and have a degree of hearing loss. These students will need you to understand their difficulties. They will certainly have difficulty communicating, and you will need to allow them more time to process what is being said. Remember that they will only be able to use one sense at a time. You need to have patience. They will certainly be missing out on non-intentional learning, or better known as incidental learning. It's our job to make sure that we fill these gaps. The teaching assistant can play a big part here in making sure that the student doesn't miss out on anything by repeating good contributions and discreetly describing what is happening during the lesson. Clarify with your student what they have learned and fill in any gaps of information that they have missed. When teaching a deaf-blind student, please use all the strategies I mentioned on previous slides. Remember to repeatedly check your student's understanding. To stop the student from becoming overwhelmed, please slow down your lesson. Use clear language and check your student's understanding before moving on. Your student will find it keeping up and understanding your lesson very difficult. They will become tired very quickly. Allow the student time out when this occurs. Here at St John Fisher, we have tried to make the Deaf Hub a welcoming room for our students. We have displays of photographs of current students having fun and smiling, doing many of the extra activities and interventions that we put in place. We also have a wall of fame that has the student silhouettes on, with the speech bubbles coming from there with their future aspirations and future goals. During break and lunch times, we have regular students that come in to play games, use iPads, and generally just let off a bit of steam. The room itself is acoustically soundproofed and can be quite a relaxed environment when it needs to be. Good relationships can be built in this environment, whether it's a quiet chat or playing games and having fun. The room itself also has a functional aspect to it. We have trays with students' names in there so that they have a space to put any equipment that they have, like spare batteries or cleaning equipment. They can put it in their tray with their name on it, so they know that if they run out of battery, for example, they can come straight up to the hub, replace that battery very, very easily. The teaching assistant plays a very important role in helping our hub students access mainstream lessons. It is so important to build good relationships with the students straight away. The teaching assistant should be reading any EHCPs or any other related documents to find out about the students' likes, dislikes, not just in school, but generally. Who are they? What do they like doing? What aspirations do they have? And who do they talk to? If you can find out this sort of information, it will really help to form good relationships. Also, remember to find out about their condition. If you have taken the time to understand their needs and you show them that you understand their needs, then forming relationships becomes that much easier. And in turn, this will help the student to achieve their full potential. Some students may really need the teaching assistant to be discreet. With these students, if you are not discreet with what you do, then you risk pushing that student away. It's quite a difficult one, to be honest. It's a very fine line between too much attention and not enough support. Remember that every student is different. What works for one student may not work for another. It's up to the teaching assistant to find out what works best for that particular student. One of the best ways to find out what works for the student is to ask them privately. Ask them in a quiet room, what is it that they want? Some students may want you sat next to them because it makes them feel supported and safe. Other students may not want you sat next to them, but they do want you to support them. Ask them, find out, what do they want? A good tip would be to make sure that you're supporting all the students around your STEM learner. So for example, don't just go up to the student and support that student. Go up to the table that they're working on and support all of the students on the table. So then it looks like you're not singling out that learner and you're supporting everybody. So your SEN learner gets your support from you, but also feels better about themselves because they're not being singled out as sent. Another good example would be if the student has an iPad on their desk. For example, if it's a vision impaired student and they have an iPad on their desk and they look a bit worried to take the photograph, because some could be a bit scared and don't want to look different. Simply walk up to the desk, pick up the iPad, take the photograph for them, put it back onto the desk, don't say a word. This way they can enlarge what they need to, and they haven't actually got to do anything. And it's all done very discreetly, very quietly, without anyone really noticing. There are other external agencies that you can turn to for support. Sense, RNIB and the NDCS all have really good websites with lots of case studies and resources, links to other sites and helpful tips. It's always worth remembering that these agencies are available anytime through their website. If you're watching this video, you may already be aware of the Sensory Support Service, but it's worth me pointing out that the Sensory Support team based in Peterborough have many qualified teachers of the deaf and qualified teachers of vision impairment who have vast experience and are very happy to offer any support or help that you need. So please get in contact if you need to, and their email address is on this slide. We have now come to the end of this training session. I hope you've been able to gain some insight into how we support our learners here at St John Fisher. It is always beneficial to share good practice between schools. If anyone has any questions or queries related to anything in this presentation, please don't hesitate to email me. My email address is justin.stanford@stjohnfisherschool.org.uk. Please can you now take 5 minutes to complete the online feedback form, the link of which should have been attached to the email of this presentation. Thank you.